The quiet hum of the small cafe in the outskirts of Cedar Falls filled the air, a gentle backdrop to the fading afternoon light filtering through the windows. Claire Thompson sat at the corner table by the glass, her simple cream dress slightly wrinkled from the long wait. Her fingers gripped the cold glass of water, the ice long melted into a watery pool at the bottom. She checked her watch for the 12th time. 4 p.m. had been the agreed time for the blind date, but now it was 5:15. The man from the app whose profile promised easy conversation and shared interests was nowhere in sight. Maybe traffic, she thought, staring at her reflection in the window. Or he forgot. Or he saw my real photos and changed his mind. Claire wasn't the type to stand out average height, a soft figure that didn't turn heads, and a face that blended into crowds. She was just an ordinary woman, 28 years old, with a heart scarred from too many broken promises. Past relationships had left her questioning her worth, each one ending in quiet abandonment. Her mother had always said, "Don't settle for someone who won't hold you when you fall, boy." But finding that someone felt impossible. Around her, the cafe patrons cast subtle glances, some with pity, others with idle curiosity. A couple at the next table whispered their laughter, feeling like a spotlight on her solitude. Claire's cheeks burned, but she held her head high, refusing to leave just yet. Giving up would mean admitting defeat again. The door chimed softly as a man entered. He wasn't the one she was expecting, no tailored suit, no cologne that screamed confidence. Instead, he was dressed in a plain white shirt sleeves rolled up with faint oil stains on his hands from a day's work. Jack Harlan, 35, scanned the room briefly, his eyes landing on Claire. Something in her posture, the hunched shoulders, the empty stare struck a chord in him. He knew that look all too well from his own past, from the night his wife had walked out, leaving him alone with their 6-year-old daughter. Without hesitation, Jack walked straight to her table. "Sorry, have you been waiting long?" he asked, his voice steady and kind. Claire blinked, caught off guard. Yes, but you're not—" He didn't wait for her to finish. Pulling out the chair opposite her, he sat down with a gentle smile, not mocking, not pitying, just genuine. "If you'll allow me, I'll sit here, just until you don't feel so alone anymore." She stared at him, her mind racing. Who was this stranger? Why would he do this? The cafe seemed to fade around them as she processed his words. For the first time in what felt like hours, the weight on her chest lightened a fraction. The whispers from nearby tables quieted, replaced by the soft clink of cups and the distant whir of the coffee machine. They sat in silence for a moment, the awkwardness hanging between them like a thin veil. Jack flagged down a waiter and ordered 2 cups of tea as if this were the most natural thing in the world. When the drinks arrived, he slid one toward her. "Tea helps sometimes," he said simply. "Warms you up from the inside." Claire hesitated, then wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "I've been where you are. Left waiting, wondering what I did wrong. It's a lousy feeling. Figured no one should go through it alone if they don't have to." She studied him, his calloused hands, the faint lines around his eyes from years of hard work and single parenting. He didn't seem like the type to play games. Slowly, she nodded. "Thank you, I don't even know your name." "Jack," he replied. "And yours?" "Claire." The conversation started tentatively, like testing thin ice. They talked about the weather outside, how the autumn leaves were turning early this year. Jack mentioned how the cafe's scones used to be better with more butter. Claire found herself smiling faintly, the tension easing with each passing minute. As the clock ticked toward closing time, she realized the date she had been waiting for no longer mattered. This unexpected encounter had shifted something inside her. "Who are you really?" Claire asked as they prepared to leave. Jack stood offering her his coat against the evening chill. "Just someone who's been abandoned before, and knows how much it hurts." They sat there for over 40 minutes, the steam from their teacups rising lazily into the air, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh pastries from the counter. The conversation flowed in fragments, unhurried and without the pressure of introductions or interrogations. No questions about names, jobs, or marital status, just simple observations that bridged the gap between strangers. Outside, a light rain began to patter against the window, turning the world beyond into a blurred watercolor. "Looks like the weather's turning," Jack said, glancing out. "Reminds me of those days when everything just slows down." Claire nodded, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "Yeah. Rain makes the world feel smaller, doesn't it? Like it's okay to just sit and watch." They talked about the scones on display, how they used to have more cream back when the cafe was under different ownership. Jack pointed to a couple at a nearby table, their laughter loud but their eyes distant. "See them. They're talking a lot, but not really looking at each other. Makes you wonder what's missing." Claire followed his gaze, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe they're just nervous. Or maybe they've forgotten how to really connect." She paused, then added softly, "I guess that's why I'm here, hoping for something real." Jack took a sip of his tea, his expression thoughtful. "I get that. Real is hard to come by these days." She looked at him more closely now, noticing the way his shirt was slightly untucked, the subtle wear on his shoes. "You know, I don't think you're the guy I was supposed to meet today." He chuckled lightly, setting his cup down. "No, I'm not. But if I were, I wouldn't have kept you waiting even a minute." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Claire felt a lump form in her throat, the sincerity in his voice catching her off guard. It was the kind of thing no one had said to her in years, not since her last serious relationship ended in a quiet fade-out, leaving her questioning if she was worth the effort. As the minutes ticked by, the conversation deepened just enough to feel comfortable. Claire shared a bit about her life. "I work as a freelance accountant. It's flexible but lonely sometimes. Not many friends to grab coffee with. My mom always told me, don't love someone who won't put a hand on your shoulder when you're falling." Wise words, I guess. Jack listened without interrupting his nod, encouraging. When it was his turn, he spoke evenly. "I'm a single dad. Work at an auto shop on the edge of town, fixing engines mostly. Nothing glamorous. Evenings are for my daughter. She's 6. I make her tea before bed, the herbal kind, helps her sleep, and I listen to old cassette tapes and the truck stuff from the 80s. Keeps things simple." Claire's eyes softened. "That sounds nice. Being there for someone like that." They circled back to lighter topics, but eventually the question slipped out. "Have you ever been left hanging midway through something?" Claire asked, her voice tentative. Jack stared into his cup for a moment. "Yeah, more than once. But no one's ever come back." "And you?" he asked gently. "Same. Left before I even got a chance to step in fully." The shared vulnerability hung between them, not heavy, but real. For the first time in months, Claire felt a genuine smile crease her face, not forced, not polite, but true. As the sky outside darkened, Claire glanced at her watch. "I should probably head out. Work calls," Jack nodded. "You heading home safe?" She stood gathering her things. "Yeah. What about you?" "I can stick around a bit longer," he said with a shrug. "Who knows, someone else might need company." Claire paused at the door, turning back to see him still seated quietly, finishing the last of his tea. There was no rush in his posture, no impatience, just presence. That evening, as she settled into her apartment, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the man who had stood her up. "Sorry, totally forgot. Rain check tomorrow." She stared at the screen, then deleted it without a second thought. Instead, she opened a new message and typed to the number Jack had given her before she left. "The tea this afternoon was a bit bland, but the way you looked at it like it was the most precious thing on the table made me feel warm inside." The second week blurred into Sundays at the small cafe on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, a ritual that had become their quiet escape. The place felt like a sanctuary, now faded wooden tables, the soft clink of cups, and the distant hum of traffic outside. Jack and Claire met there each afternoon, the conversation starting light and evolving into something deeper, like peeling back layers of an onion without the sting. They talked about nothing and everything, the way the leaves were turning gold earlier this year, the overpriced pastries that tasted better shared the couples at neighboring tables whose laughter rang hollow. Jack shared snippets of his life as a mechanic fixing engines in the garage that doubled as his second home, raising his 6-year-old daughter Lily on his own since his wife had passed 3 years ago from a sudden illness. "She's my world," he said one Sunday, his voice softening. Teaches me more about patience than any customer ever could. Claire listened, her eyes warm, sharing in return about her freelance accounting work numbers that balanced on paper but never quite added up to fulfillment in her personal life. I keep to myself mostly, she admitted. Friends come and go. It's easier that way. But on that particular Sunday afternoon, the door chimed and everything shifted. A woman in her early 30s strode in her tailored coat and heels clicking sharply against the floor. She scanned the room with a practiced eye, then froze when her gaze landed on Claire. Claire, what on earth are you doing here? Jack looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. Claire's face paled, but she forced a smile. Sarah, I'm just having tea. With a friend. Sarah's eyes flicked to Jack, taking in his worn shirt and calloused hands, then back to Claire. Tea in this place with him. The disdain was subtle but unmistakable, like a chill wind slipping through the cracks. The air thickened. Jack lowered his gaze politely, but Claire's hand tightened under the table, her knuckles whitening. You should go ahead, Sarah. I'll call you later. Sarah lingered a beat longer, her lips pursing. If Dad finds out you're slumming it in places like this, he'd probably have a fit. She turned on her heel and left the door swinging shut behind her with a decisive thud. Claire stared at her tea, the steam long gone. Jack didn't speak for a long moment, the silence stretching like a taut wire. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, measured. Who was that? My sister-in-law. Claire said, her words clipped. Family. Complication. Jack nodded slowly, but something in his eyes had changed a distance, like a door cracking open to reveal shadows. He drove her home that evening in silence, the usual easy chatter absent. At her apartment door, Claire turned to him. You're upset. He shook his head, not quite meeting her eyes. Not upset. Just, I didn't realize who you are. What do you mean? She asked, her heart sinking. You're Claire Devlin, he said flatly. Daughter of the CEO of Devlin Group. The one they write about in business magazines, the heiress who could buy this whole town if she wanted. Claire froze. How had he known? The pieces clicked Sarah's comment the way Jack had pieced it together. Jack, He held up a hand, gentle but firm. You didn't lie, but you didn't tell the truth either, and now I don't know what to think. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, the weight of her secret pressing down. The next evening, she drove to Jack's garage on the edge of town, 2 steaming cups of tea in hand. No makeup, no fancy dress, just her in jeans and a sweater. The garage lights were on the clank of tools, echoing as Jack worked late. She knocked on the open door. Jack. He looked up from under a hood, wiping his hands on a rag. Surprise flickered across his face, then softened. Claire. She stepped inside, the scent of oil and metal familiar now. I brought tea. Thought we could talk? He nodded, leading her to a small office cluttered with parts and blueprints. They sat on folding chairs, the tea warming their hands. You're right, she said quietly. I didn't tell you everything. I'm Claire Devlin. Yes, that Devlin. Heiress to a fortune I never asked for, but I'm also the girl who gets stood up, who cries in public restrooms because no one sees her for who she is. I came here to escape that world, to be just me. I was scared that if you knew, you'd see the money instead of the person. Jack listened, his expression unreadable at first. Then he stood walking to the window overlooking the dark lot. I get being scared, he said finally. After my wife died, I shut down. Thought no one would want a broke mechanic with a kid and a mountain of debt. But you let me see you, the real you. And now I wonder if any of it was real. It was, Claire insisted, her voice breaking. Every laugh, every story, it was me, not the heiress. Just Claire who likes your tea and your stories about Lily. He turned back, eyes searching hers. I don't need your money, Claire. I need honesty. If this is going to be something, it has to be real. She nodded, tears spilling. It is. And I'm done hiding. The distance didn't vanish overnight, but it began to close. Jack didn't pull away. Instead, he invited her for dinner that week, Lily chattering excitedly about her school project. Slowly, the trust rebuilt, one shared meal, one honest conversation at a time. Claire opened up about the pressure of her family's expectations, the way her father had always seen her as an extension of the business rather than a person. Jack shared the raw grief of losing his wife the nights he'd stayed up with Lily, wondering if he was enough. By the end of the month, the cafe Sundays resumed, but with a new understanding. The secret had been a wall, but tearing it down had made room for something stronger. Claire wasn't just a mystery anymore. She was part of their world, and Jack was beginning to realize he didn't want her to leave it. The morning light filtered through the garage windows in Cedar Falls, casting long shadows across the concrete floor scattered with tools and engine parts. Jack Harlan wiped sweat from his brow as he slid out from under a sedan, his hands blackened with grease. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where the world seemed to hold its breath before the week rushed in. The radio played softly in the background, an old cassette tape of folk songs humming through the static. A small voice broke the rhythm. "Daddy, have you seen Claire?" Jack looked up surprised to see his 6-year-old daughter Lily standing in the doorway. She clutched a folded piece of paper in her small hands, her curly hair tied back with a ribbon, eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and concern. Lily had met Claire a few times now, dinners at their modest home where Claire had helped with homework or read bedtime stories. The girl had taken to her, quickly calling her Aunt Claire without prompting. "She's not here, kiddo," Jack said, sitting up and wiping his hands on a rag. "Why do you ask?" Lily shuffled forward, her sneakers scuffing the floor. "I went to the park by the lake this morning with Mrs. Jenkins. She watches me sometimes. Claire's usually there on the bench reading or something. I brought her a cookie, but she wasn't there. Then I found this on the ground near her spot. I think it's hers." Jack took the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a printed email, the header from Devlin Group, addressed to the board of directors. The subject line read, "Resignation and withdrawal of shares." As he scanned the lines, his breath caught. "Effective immediately, I am resigning from all positions and withdrawing my shares in Devlin Group. Reason to pursue a life of authenticity and personal fulfillment." At the bottom, in bold, signed Claire Devlin. The words hit him like a cold wave. Claire was walking away from everything, her family's empire, the wealth, the expectations. For what? Authenticity. He thought back to their last conversation in the garage, her tearful confession, his own guarded response. Had she done this because of him? Or was it something deeper, a break she'd needed all along? Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Is she okay, Daddy? She looked sad last time." Jack forced a smile, ruffling her hair. "I think so. Thanks for bringing this, sweetie. Go play while I finish up here." That afternoon, Jack found himself walking the path to the small lake near the old high school, a spot Claire had mentioned in passing where she went to think and write in her journal. The air was crisp leaves crunching underfoot, the water still and reflective. She was there, sitting on the weathered bench, her hair tied back, simply eyes distant as she stared at the horizon. No designer clothes, just a plain sweater and jeans, a notebook open on her lap. He approached quietly, sitting beside her without a word. The silence stretched comfortable, yet charged. "I sent the resignation," Claire said, finally not looking at him. "I'm leaving town soon, starting fresh somewhere quieter." Jack nodded, the paper still in his pocket. "I know. Lily found this." He handed it to her. "You dropped it, I guess." She took at her fingers, brushing his, a small spark in the touch. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I thought, after everything, you'd think I was running away." He gazed at the lake, the water rippling gently. "I didn't know about the resignation. Figured you'd go back to that life, the dresses, the boardrooms. Leave the tea afternoons behind." Claire turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I thought success would keep people from leaving me. But it just made me lonelier. What I need is someone who stays even when I'm not impressive." Jack stood, extending his hand. "The cafe's still there. The tea's waiting. I'm not sure I can promise forever who can. But I know, if you don't come back today, we'll both regret it." She hesitated, then took his hand, standing slowly. They walked side by side, steps unhurried like mending a path worn by time. No grand apologies, no dramatic declarations, just the quiet act of moving forward together. Back at the cafe, they claimed their usual table by the window. The waiter recognized them bringing tea without asking. They sat with the warmth of the cups between them, no need for questions about hidden truths or past hurts. Jack broke a scone in half, offering her a piece. Claire accepted it, their fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden hues across the room, the weight of the misunderstanding lifted. Forgiveness wasn't spoken. It was in the shared silence, the way they leaned in to listen. The promise of more Sundays to come. In the week that followed, Claire made the quiet decision to simplify her life further. She moved into a modest apartment just a few blocks from Jack's garage in Cedar Falls, leaving behind the spacious condo her family had insisted on. No grand announcements, no farewell parties, just a few boxes of essentials and a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. The apartment was small, with creaky floors and a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, but it felt right. For the first time, she wasn't living to prove anything. She was just living. Jack helped her unpack his strong hands, lifting boxes, while Lily darted around, helping, by arranging books on the shelves in haphazard piles. The little girl had warmed to Claire quickly, her initial shyness giving way to chatter about school drawings and favorite stories. "Will you read to me tonight, Claire?" Lily asked one evening, clutching a worn picture book. Claire nodded, sitting on the couch as Jack watched from the doorway, a soft smile on his face. It was in these moments that the fractures from their misunderstanding began to heal, not with dramatic gestures, but with the steady rhythm of everyday life. Claire dove into the simplicity with enthusiasm. She learned to cook in the tiny kitchen, starting with basic recipes Jack shared: pasta sauces, simmered on the stove fresh bread from the corner bakery. Her hands, once accustomed to signing contracts, now bore flour stains as she experimented. Jack opened up more too, sharing the vulnerabilities he'd guarded since his wife's death. Evenings turned into family routines, dinners where Lily dominated the conversation, walks by the lake, where Claire and Jack talked about dreams deferred and futures possible. Lily became the unspoken bridge between them. The girl saw Claire not as an intruder, but as a gentle presence who braided her hair and listened to her endless questions. "You're like a mom who tells good stories," Lily said one night, climbing into Claire's lap during a bedtime read. Jack overheard his heart tightening with a mix of grief and gratitude. He hadn't expected this, hadn't planned for anyone to fill the void, but seeing his daughter light up made him realize he was ready to let someone in. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, they returned to the cafe, claiming their familiar table by the window. The place hadn't changed, the same faded chairs, the same menu of teas and scones, but they had. Claire placed a small wooden box on the table, her fingers tracing the lid nervously. "I want you to see this," she said, sliding it toward him. Jack opened it, revealing a worn notebook filled with her handwriting. He flipped through the pages slowly, each entry a snapshot of their time together. Day 1. He didn't ask my name, just if I was cold. Day 3. I want to tell him everything, but I'm afraid it'll shatter what we have. The day he went silent, my heart felt empty, like cold tea left too long. The words painted her vulnerability, her fears, her growing affection. He closed the book, gently meeting her eyes. Claire's voice was soft. "Do you still resent me?" Jack shook his head. "I never resented you. It hurt. That's all, thinking you didn't trust me enough to share the truth." She reached across the table, her hand finding his. "So, if I promise no more secrets, will you keep me?" He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I'm not keeping you, Claire. I'm choosing to stand beside you, so if you ever get lost again, you'll know the way back." They didn't rush into marriage or a big house. Life unfolded in its unhurried way. Jack at the garage, Claire freelancing from her apartment evenings shared with Lily's laughter filling the spaces. They worked through the ordinary bills, tired days, small arguments, resolved with quiet talks. Claire's family reached out sporadically, confused by her choices, but she held firm, building a life on her terms. Yet every afternoon they returned to the cafe, sitting at that same table, sharing tea as the world moved on outside. To passers-by, they were just another couple, imperfect, unremarkable. But in their glances, in the way they shared silence as comfortably as words, there was something profound. Some people enter your life quietly, leaving marks that time can't erase. They sit with you when the world turns away, seeing the parts of you that ache and loving them anyway. Don't chase the perfect love. Seek the one that embraces your imperfections, the one that stays.